The photograph is a testament to a friendship that seemed unshakable. Two women, arms slung around each other's shoulders, faces tilted toward the sun, their smiles wide and unguarded. One is Taylor Wright, her eyes crinkling at the corners with a warmth that leaps from the image. The other is Ashley MacArthur, her head inclined toward Taylor's, a picture of easy camaraderie. This is how the world saw them. Confidants, allies, a sanctuary for one another in the messy complexities of life. But beneath the surface of this captured moment, a darkness was festering. One of these women was a fighter, a survivor, a devoted mother. The other, the prosecution would later argue, was a predator in a friend's skin, meticulously plotting a betrayal so profound it would end in a grave of concrete and soil, and a child left motherless. This is not just a story of a murder. It is a chilling dissection of deception, a real-time unraveling of a lie that fractured a community and exposed the terrifying truth that sometimes the greatest danger wears the face of someone you trust. It is the story of Taylor Wright's vanishing, the unsettling calm of the friend she left behind, and the digital and forensic trail that led investigators from a simple missing persons case to a premeditated act of brutal avarice. To understand the tragedy of Taylor Wright's end, one must first appreciate the resilience that defined her life. Her beginning was not one of easy privilege or stability. From her earliest years, Taylor was acquainted with uncertainty, navigating the challenging landscape of the foster care system. For many, such a start could forge a life of struggle. For Taylor, it seemed to have the opposite effect. It built within her a fierce independence, a profound understanding of life's fragility, and a deep-seated desire for order and protection. This calling led her to a career in law enforcement. She became a deputy, a guardian sworn to serve and protect. The badge was not just a job, it was an extension of her identity. Colleagues described her as tenacious, thorough, and deeply compassionate. She understood the line between order and chaos because she had seen the precipice. But her most defining role, the one that anchored her entire existence, was that of a mother. Her son, Drake, was her North Star. Every decision, every struggle, was filtered through the lens of providing him with a stable, loving childhood she had to fight for. That stability, however, was under threat. Her marriage to Jeff Wright had collapsed, descending into the all-too-common turmoil of a contentious divorce. The battle was twofold: a painful custody dispute over Drake and acrimonious financial disagreements. It was a draining, public, and private war that consumed immense emotional energy. Yet, amidst this conflict, a beacon of hope emerged. A legal settlement, totaling $100,000, was awarded to Taylor. It was a lifeline, a chance to secure a future for herself and her son, to buy a home, to finally build the unshakable foundation she had always craved. In a decision that would later be scrutinized with heartbreaking intensity, Taylor withdrew a large portion of this money, $34,000, in cash. And in a move that defies easy understanding, she entrusted this substantial sum not to a financial institution or a blood relative, but to her friend, Ashley MacArthur. The reasons may have seemed sound at the time: a desire to keep the assets fluid during the divorce, a fear of accounts being frozen, a belief in the unbreachable fortress of friendship. It was a gesture of ultimate trust, a passing of a tangible piece of her future into the hands of someone she believed was her ally. Ashley MacArthur accepted this trust. She presented herself as a pillar of support in Taylor's turbulent life. She was there during the emotional lows of the divorce, offering a listening ear and a shoulder to lean on. But this facade of friendship concealed a startling reality. Shortly after receiving the cash, Ashley MacArthur forged a cashier's check and deposited Taylor's $34,000 into her own personal bank account. The fortress of friendship had been breached from within. The lifeline had been severed, and Taylor Wright, a woman trained to detect danger, remained tragically unaware that the greatest threat was now standing beside her. The stage was set for a confrontation. Taylor would inevitably discover the theft. As a law enforcement officer, she was duty-bound to report it. For Ashley, The exposure of her crime meant not only disgrace and criminal charges for fraud, but the utter collapse of her world. The pressure was building, a silent, invisible tension between the two women that would soon snap with catastrophic force. September 8th, 2017, dawned like any other day, but it would be etched into the memory of a community as the day the light went out. It was a day of mundane plans and ordinary errands. Taylor was scheduled to meet Ashley. The stated purpose involved bank-related tasks, a cruel irony that would not be lost on investigators later. They met, two friends, their interaction captured perhaps by passing traffic cameras, the last images of Taylor Wright alive. Then she vanished. The first and most piercing alarm was not a police siren, but a mother's intuition. Taylor Wright would never, under any circumstances, fail to pick up her son, Drake. He was her compass, her absolute priority. When she didn't arrive, when her phone went straight to voicemail, the frantic calls began. The ecosystem of her life, family, friends, colleagues, sensed immediately that something was terribly wrong. This was not a woman who would simply disappear. The protector had gone missing, and the community she served shifted instantly into search mode. The official investigation launched with the grim urgency of a missing persons case, where time is the critical factor. The first and most logical step was to speak to the last person known to have seen her, Ashley MacArthur. Investigators approached her, expecting a partner in panic, a distraught friend desperate to aid in the search for Taylor. What they encountered was a narrative, delivered with a composure that some would later describe as unsettlingly smooth. Ashley provided a detailed account of their meeting. She claimed they had parted ways amicably, that Taylor was fine, and that she, Ashley, had then gone on with her day, which included going horseback riding. She presented an alibi that painted a picture of a normal, tranquil afternoon. She was cooperative, she was specific, and she seemed, to some, curiously detached from the escalating crisis. But in the modern age, alibis are no longer built solely on human testimony. We are all followed by digital ghosts, our movements silently logged by the devices we carry and the networks that connect us. As investigators began to pull these electronic threads, Ashley MacArthur's carefully constructed story began to fray at the edges. The first major crack appeared with the analysis of cell tower data. Ashley's phone, her constant companion, told a story that diverged sharply from her spoken account. The pings from the cellular network did not place her phone near a stable or along a scenic trail suitable for a leisurely ride. Instead, the digital breadcrumbs led to a remote, rural area, a location inconsistent with her claimed activities. This was not conclusive proof of a crime, but it was a glaring inconsistency. It was the first hard evidence that Ashley MacArthur was not being entirely truthful. Why would she lie about her whereabouts on the afternoon her best friend vanished? The public, meanwhile, was grappling with the mystery in real time. Social media platforms became the town square for speculation, fear, and burgeoning suspicion. The hashtag Find Taylor Wright began to trend, a digital rallying cry for a community in distress. Online, the community fractured. Armchair detectives and concerned citizens dissected every available detail. Let's not turn on Ashley. She's grieving too. We need to support Taylor's friends, not attack them. #CommunityStrong, wrote one user, echoing a sentiment of unity and support for the grieving friend. But this was quickly countered by a growing wave of skepticism. If her best friend was the last to see her, why isn't she out there leading the search 24/7? Something feels off. #WhereIsTaylorWright posted another, giving voice to the unease that the cell data was confirming for investigators. The division was stark. Some saw Ashley as a fellow victim, a woman struggling with the traumatic disappearance of her closest friend. Others saw her calm demeanor not as strength, but as a sign of something more calculating. The conversation was no longer just about finding Taylor. It was beginning to circle around the person who had last been with her. The focus of the investigation and of public opinion was narrowing. Driven by the discrepancy in the cell phone data, investigators secured search warrants for Ashley's financial records and personal communications. What they uncovered was the motive, laid bare in black and white. The $34,000 from Taylor Wright was not sitting in a safe or waiting to be returned. It had been actively stolen. The forged cashier's check and the subsequent deposit into Ashley's account transformed the investigation irrevocably. Taylor Wright's disappearance was no longer a missing persons case. It was now a potential homicide investigation rooted in financial fraud. The trusted friend was now the prime suspect. The question hanging over the entire case was no longer, where is Taylor? But what did Ashley do? The pressure on Ashley MacArthur intensified. Confronted with the evidence of the stolen funds, her story began to mutate. She offered new explanations, alternative timelines, but each version seemed to create more contradictions than it resolved. The tranquil facade began to show hairline fractures. The composed friend now appeared evasive, her narrative shifting under the weight of evidence. Then came the witnesses. As the investigation deepened, individuals from the periphery of Ashley's life came forward, their testimonies painting a horrifying picture of premeditation. They reported that Ashley had not merely reacted to a crisis she had created through theft. She had allegedly spoken of a solution. Multiple witnesses testified that in the days and weeks leading up to September 8th, Ashley MacArthur had voiced her desperation over the stolen money being discovered. She had allegedly speculated about ways to silence Taylor Wright permanently. The words drugging and killing were uttered in these conversations, not as abstract fears, but as contemplated options. This testimony was a seismic shift. It suggested that the meeting on September 8th was not a spontaneous confrontation that turned violent. It suggested a trap. It painted a picture of a woman who, faced with the exposure of her financial crime, had coolly and deliberately decided that murder was the preferable outcome. The premeditation, if proven, would elevate the crime to a new level of chilling calculation. Armed with this new testimony and the irrefutable financial evidence, investigators obtained a warrant to search the remote property linked to Ashley's phone on the day of the disappearance. The air was thick with a grim sense of anticipation. They knew they were looking for a body. The search teams, aided by forensic archaeologists, scanned the land, their tools probing the earth for the disturbance that would signal a grave. And then they found it. Beneath the unassuming surface, the excavation began. The earth gave up its terrible secret. There, encased in a crude tomb of concrete and potting soil, were the skeletal remains of Taylor Wright. The concrete, a desperate attempt to hasten decomposition and conceal the body forever, had failed in its purpose. Justice would not be so easily buried. Among the remains, a single, poignant piece of evidence was recovered, a necklace, a personal item that confirmed the identity of the victim beyond any doubt. Taylor Wright had been found. The how and the where were now known. The why was becoming devastatingly clear. The only question that remained was whether the judicial system could prove what everyone now believed. The discovery turned a case of speculation into a case of capital murder. Ashley MacArthur was arrested and charged with first-degree premeditated murder, fraud, and tampering with evidence. The trial that followed was a media spectacle, a painful, public autopsy of a friendship and a crime. The prosecution built its case like a fortress, stone by stone. They presented the timeline of the theft, establishing the powerful motive of greed and self-preservation. They displayed the cell tower data, illustrating the defendant's lies about her location. They played surveillance footage that contradicted her alibi, showing her vehicle in areas she claimed not to have been. They brought forth the damning witness testimonies, each one adding another layer to the portrait of premeditation. The story they told was one of cold-blooded calculation: steal the money, lure the friend, commit the act, conceal the body, and construct a lie. The defense, in turn, attacked the case where it could. They questioned the reliability of the witnesses, suggesting they were motivated by notoriety or old grudges. They argued that the evidence was circumstantial, that there was no direct, physical proof, like a murder weapon or an eyewitness, that placed Ashley MacArthur as the killer. They attempted to create reasonable doubt by portraying the investigation as having tunnel vision, focused solely on Ashley from the beginning. But the totality of the evidence was overwhelming. The motive was undeniable. The deception was documented. The body was found on a path directly tied to the defendant. The jury was tasked with sifting through the complex web of digital data, financial records, and human testimony. After deliberation, the verdict was delivered. Ashley MacArthur was found guilty on all counts, first-degree premeditated murder, and the related fraud charges. The conviction confirmed what the evidence had so compellingly suggested, that Taylor Wright's death was not an accident, not a crime of passion, but a deliberate, planned execution, all for $34,000. The gavel fell, and with it, a measure of justice was served. Ashley MacArthur was sentenced to life in prison, a permanent confinement that stood in stark contrast to the freedom she had stolen from Taylor Wright. But in the wake of the trial, in the silent spaces left behind, the true cost of the crime remains. A young boy named Drake grows up without his mother. A family grieves for a daughter, a sister, a friend whose life was cut short by an unimaginable betrayal. A community was forced to reconcile with the fact that a monster had lived among them, disguised as a friend. The story of Taylor Wright is a harrowing reminder of the dualities that can exist within a single human heart. It is a cautionary tale about the masks people wear and the depths of deception they are capable of. The concrete that encased her body has been broken, but the emotional rubble of her loss remains. The truth was uncovered, the killer was imprisoned, but for those who loved Taylor Wright, the world is forever dimmer, a place where trust must now be tempered with a painful, hard-won vigilance. The justice system provided a closing argument, but for a son without a mother, the sentence of loss is a life term.